To me, I don't see it as like off the wagon or off the wagon. I fell off the wagon. There's no wagon. Your life is the wagon. What's working for you and what's not, you can't fall off of it. You're either in alignment with what works for you or what doesn't.
Hey friends, welcome to Keep It Simple Sexy. I'm Christine Bullock, founder of KO Body Care, certified fitness trainer and mom of 2 little girls who's just trying to juggle it all and feel as good as possible. I'm so grateful that you're here. Now let's get started, sexy. Hello everyone, welcome back. Well, have you ever felt confused by all the different diets out there on the market? Where to start? Which is best? Well, me too, until I found the one basic guide to preventing disease, feeling my best, and keeping me young. It's called an anti-inflammatory diet. And my next guest says if you dive into just about every health problem that we face in the world today, like anxiety, depression, fatigue, digestive problems, hormone imbalance, diabetes, heart disease, or even autoimmune issues, they're all inflammatory in nature. He also calls this the age of inflammation. Womp womp. So today, let's find out how you could be helping or hurting your body through your diet and lifestyle choices with my next guest, Dr. Will Cole. Dr. Cole is a leading functional medicine expert who consults people around the world via webcam and locally in Pittsburgh, helping thousands to lose weight and regain vitality. He's the best-selling author of Ketotarian, The Inflammation Spectrum, which we'll be breaking down today, and the New York Times bestseller Intuitive Fasting, in which he shows how to use the powerful benefits of flexible intermittent fasting to gain metabolic flexibility and find food peace. I love that. Dr. Cole is the host of a new podcast, The Art of Being Well. You have to check it out and subscribe. And he's co-hosted Goopfellas podcast and Keto Talk. Welcome to the show, Dr. Cole.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. And I mean, first of all, we have to break down the question that everybody needs to know. You're from Pittsburgh. Did you grow up in Pittsburgh?
I did.
What part of Pittsburgh?
Are you from Pittsburgh as well?
Yins and not, yeah. Go Steelers.
That's right. Eastern, like in this country outside of Pittsburgh, Westmoreland County. It's where I still live now, actually. So, eastern suburbs.
Well, I think I'm from Westmoreland County. It's been a couple years. I'm from Murraysville.
Oh, my clinic is in the Murraysville area. So, yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's
My
so
dad
funny.
was a teacher at Franklin. I was a teacher there for a little bit, taught at like Gateway.
Small world.
We can talk about all of it.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at right now. And I consult people around the world from this spot, right from the Murraysville area.
Go Pittsburgh. I love it. Yeah, my husband's from Carnegie too, and we met out here in Los Angeles.
Awesome. But
yeah,
hey,
he's from
the best
downtown. He's
That's
from downtown.
right.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I promise, guys, we won't talk about Pittsburgh this whole time. But yeah, that's so cool, Dr. Cole.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank
you. From pierogies to Primanti Brothers to functional medicine, how did you start this journey?
Oh, man. My dad, growing up, my dad was a bodybuilder, and he was actually in the Mr. Pittsburgh competitions and stuff. So I grew up thinking it was normal to have your dad in like turquoise Speedos in the 80s and 90s, like lubed up with baby oil.
Totally normal. Yeah, everybody.
But then that, so health and wellness was part of my life growing up. And that evolved to just something that I did because mom and dad said this is the healthy foods that we were eating at home, to me really being fascinated by this field of healthcare. And it wasn't functional medicine to start with. I went to an integrative medicine school, Southern California University of Health Sciences outside of LA. And I had heard of this field of healthcare called functional medicine. And that to me was very focused from that point on. So I graduated knowing this is what I wanted to look like. This is how I wanted to help people. And I started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers in the world over a decade ago. I've been doing telehealth my entire career. It wasn't called telehealth then because there wasn't a word for that. We called it a virtual functional medicine clinic because that was the best language that I had for it at the time. But it wasn't born out of some I saw this as being the future of healthcare. Really, even though I saw the efficiency and the effectiveness of it, but it was born out of necessity. I moved back to Pittsburgh. A lot of people weren't in Pittsburgh, and I just loved helping people where they were at, wherever they were at. with issues like like the things you mentioned, all the autoimmune inflammatory problems that we're going to talk today.
That's amazing. It's funny because once I moved to Los Angeles, when I really dove back into fitness full time, because I really loved as like a preventative measure, I started to create DVDs and apps and stuff like that years ago too. And it was really because I wanted my family back in Pittsburgh to be able to have that too. So it's kind of, the same thing. And you're providing it knowing that I wanted to provide it to so many people who weren't maybe living in a really large city. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, middle America needs access to this. And most of our patients, I mean, we have a lot of Los Angelinos, we have a lot of New Yorkers as patients, but we have a big chunk of middle America that just need access to this field of healthcare so they can be wherever they are at and get healthy. And that's really my mission.
Yeah, everybody needs it. I love that. And I mean, we could break down so much stuff in functional medicine. Like you said, your books, the intuitive fasting. I can't wait to have you back and really break that down. But today I just thought, let's break down inflammation because I feel like it really is the root of all aging for us, whether we're talking about diseases like we mentioned in the intro, aging, wrinkles, not feeling energy, all of that. Can you just explain for the novice what is inflammation in a nutshell and why are you calling this the age of inflammation?
Yeah, and like you said, womp womp. It is kind of like a somber realization, but it's this dichotomous thing where while we have epidemic proportions of different inflammatory problems, we know more about it now more than ever. So it's really why we're up against a lot. We have a lot in our toolbox if we do something about it, because these are largely overcomable, supportable, reversible, healable things that you don't have to settle for it. So, but at the same time, it's a problem, especially if you don't do anything about it, because inflammation is the commonality between just about every health problem under the sun. From, you mentioned all those issues. I mean, autoimmune conditions, metabolic issues, type 2 diabetes, people that have weight loss resistance, fatigue issues, to you mentioned anxiety. I mean, there's a whole field of research called the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells. So it's research in the scientific literature looking at how inflammation impacts how our brain works. And I talk about it at length in the book and with my patients, but mental health is not separate from physical health. Mental health is physical health. Our brain is part of our body, and we cannot relegate it or just separate mental health from physical health. It's one and the same. And this whole field of research looking at neuroinflammation with people, things like anxiety and depression, brain fog, fatigue, ADHD, ADD, autism even, these are all inflammatory in nature in most cases. So this is impacting a lot of people, but researchers estimate that by the time somebody's diagnosed with a health problem, whether it be an autoimmune disease or diabetes or something like this, researchers estimate it's about 4 to 10 years prior to that diagnosis when things were brewing on this inflammation spectrum, meaning it didn't happen overnight. So I see people all different parts of that inflammation spectrum, from mild symptoms where they know, hey, something's going on here, to very extreme symptoms and they're already diagnosed. So no matter where you're at on this inflammation spectrum, the flip side of that sobering statistic is that we have a lot of information about this, and these are largely improvable, healable things. So that's what I work on with patients. It's really a message of hope and having agency over your health, because so many people feel like there's nothing for them, right? They just have to live like this. This is their lot in life, and they just have to live this sort of existence of not feeling good, not feeling or struggling with chronic health problems and on a whole list of medications. So this is really a message of hope, but you have to do something different to see something different.
Absolutely. And, a lot of our viewers and our guests, they know that I've been through autoimmune myself. And that was, something that I suffered with and started to go into ADHD, exactly what you're saying, like, and then had no energy, hair fallout, aged rapidly, just in so many different ways, joint pain and all that. So it is amazing that it can be reversed. But I also think that there's something like consistency that goes with it too, but when you feel your best, you really do want to stick with it. What are some of the signs of inflammation that people maybe can look for in the very beginning? So we know to maybe the extreme signs as well.
Yeah, sure. So it's on that inflammation spectrum. There's three main phases or stages on that inflammation spectrum. On one side, it's silent inflammation, meaning if you ran some labs, you would probably see some markers off. You'd see some inflammation markers off on labs. You'd see some immune markers off on labs, but the person is feeling all right. They're living their life. That's silent inflammation. And then stage two is inflammation reactivity or autoimmune reactivity, where these people are people that are symptomatic. They don't feel well. They know they don't feel well. They may be ignoring it and putting on the back burner, but they are experiencing symptoms. And the labs come back off as well, but they're not bad enough to be full blown in stage three, which is the autoimmune disease. And that's which I mentioned earlier. It's estimated 4 to 10 years prior to that diagnosis. And they were in those previous phases. So that is, by the time somebody's diagnosed, you have to have, in most cases, significant destruction of the parts of the body to be diagnosable, conventionally speaking. So, for example, Addison's disease or autoimmune adrenal disease, you have to have, by conventional data, you have to have 90% destruction of the adrenal glands before you will be labeled officially as having Addison's disease. You have similar enough destruction, 70 to 90% destruction of the myelin sheath in the gut when you're dealing with MS for myelin sheath, or in the gut when you're dealing with ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, celiac disease. You have to have 70 to 90% destruction of certain parts of whatever tissue you're talking about, because that's what autoimmunity is. It's autoimmune. It's when the immune system turns against itself. Researchers refer to it as the immune system losing recognition of self. It's thinking that the brain or the thyroid, in the case of Hashimoto's disease or Graves' disease, or the gut with inflammatory GI issues, is a virus or bacteria and is attacking it. It's something called molecular mimicry, the case of mistaken identity. And what I work on with patients is allow the immune system to start recognize itself again, to downregulate the inflammation, to improve immune resilience and balance, and find out, if it's possible, in most cases it is, what is perpetuating these flare-ups, whether that be some sort of virus or mycotoxin, mold toxin issue, or trauma and stress, or underlying gut problems, dysbiosis, whatever the case may be, to be relentless in the pursuit of what's going on. So that's sort of the larger, I guess, understanding of what's going on. But the symptoms, to answer your question more pointedly, on the low end symptoms are things like anxiousness, fatigue, mild depression, moderate depression, digestive problems, joint pain, hair loss, hair changes. Now, those are very broad symptoms. I'm not saying everybody who has those problems has an autoimmune issue, but let's be a little bit more clear here. You can have inflammation without it being autoimmune, but all autoimmune problems are inflammatory. So all those things that I mentioned, the fatigue, the anxiety, the weight loss resistance, the hair issues, those are all in most cases inflammatory in nature. That doesn't necessarily mean you have an autoimmune condition, but it does mean there's inflammation, and it is a sign for you to do something different, to see something different. So those are some common things that I see.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely touched upon what happens in the prolonged state of inflammation, which is where we all don't want to get to, which is why we're listening to this podcast today and reading your books, to understand what those, signs are immediately of this. So in your book, though, you talk about how bioindividuality determines what our body loves and hates, and how it's not necessarily a one size fits all for everybody. I'm sure there's a lot of common things that we can discuss that are inflammatory in nature, but that something for me, like gluten may be inflammatory, let's say for me, or you mentioned even like talking in public or being around people, your lifestyle choices can then eventually create this stress for some people where other people can't. And I feel like that's my husband and myself. Like, I need time off from even shows like this or just being in public and going to events. And my husband feeds off of it. Like he feels better, So can you break down just what bioindividuality is for us?
Yeah, that's that section in the book in the inflammation spectrum, just showing how different people are. I'm the same way as you. I'm very much an introvert, and I can't be on all the time. And especially doing what I do, like with dealing with people's heavy work, health stuff, it takes, you have to recharge. But That's the heart of functional medicine. It's bioindividuality. And that applies to every single thing in our world. It's the world of epigenetics. It's this dance, this interplay between our genetics, our biochemistry, our genome, our DNA, and the world around us. So we're all going to have very different variables when it comes to how epigenetics influences our health and how genetics are expressed, if they are expressed in a certain way. So the foods we're eating or the foods we're not eating, our stress levels, our exposure to toxins, our sleep or lack of it, all of these epigenetic or environmental lifestyle things are constantly and beautifully, dynamically influencing genetic expression in the body. So that's a very different for people. And I see this clinically on an hourly basis on a 10, 11 hours a day, is that you can have one thing that works great for one person, and the next person, even if it's a similar case, can flare the next person up. So you have to be open-minded. As obviously as a clinician, I can't hang my hat on this one size fits all approach, this cookie cutter approach. But for the person that's listening to this right now, just because somebody else, it works for your friend, or because you saw it on social media, doesn't necessarily mean that's your path. So test,
Preach.
experiment, be open-minded to changing things, because our health's evolving. We're all different. It's okay to adapt and evolve as we learn what our body loves and what our body hates.
I mean, definitely like the tuning in, like I've realized over the years, like I will get sick. If I have to go to event after event with him and we're sharing and stuff, we both own our businesses, like I will ultimately just, my immunity goes down, exactly what you're saying. And I get sick afterwards, not necessarily from catching it from somebody, just being from so exhausted. But we talk about not just the lifestyle choices. I think no matter what your lifestyle choices, you are what you eat, and we're eating a couple times a day at least. So in your book, you really break down major inflammatory foods. Well, like you're saying, these could be inflammatory to some people, but you break it down where you have a series of 4 and a series of 8 to test to see what you may be allergic to. Can you explain what those are, and then how maybe someone from home can do a little bit of a test? And honestly, I'll say I am just recently taking one of those additional foods out and feeling a lot better too, which we can get into.
Yeah. Well, that just like, I think you said that brilliantly. It could be an issue. These are the 4 or 8 foods that could be an issue, but because of bioindividuality, it may work fine for you. And especially on the eliminate track, there are healthy whole foods that work great for people. So I'm not maligning any specific food. There are statistically foods that don't work for a lot of people, but it's still just a lot. There's still a section of people that are fine with those foods. So what I call the core 4, these are the 4 foods. I think maybe the inflammatory core 4, the 4 foods or food ingredients that could be problematic for you and are problematic for a lot of people. So those are going to be gluten-containing grains, things like wheat, rye, oat, barley, spelt. You can gluten-free grains, gluten-free oats too. And even gluten-free grains can be problematic for some people. And I do take them out of all recipes for this protocol. And these are forms of an elimination diet protocol. Not everybody has to do the same thing. So I use a quiz in the book. I also put the quiz on drrocole.com if people want to just take the quiz before getting the book. Yeah, it's free, and they could just see where they're at on the inflammation spectrum. But core 4.
And to break into that quiz, I think everybody should go on his website and do that, because that was great. It tells you where you may actually have the inflammation as well.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of mine was in my gut, which I knew from former digestive issues that I had. So I love that.
So that quiz is adapted from questions that I ask patients. So I just basically went and made it more user-friendly for the reader if, I'm not there. And that was always the tough thing writing that book, is because I'm used to navigating things and interpreting the questionnaires and health history myself. So that's just an adaptation of a consultation with me that I have via webcam. So at least part of it. So there's multiple different systems of the body that we talk about. You mentioned gut, and we talk about brain and the hormonal system. We talk about something called autoimmunity or polyinflammation, where the inflammation is impacting more than one area, which is a lot of my patients. So the core 4 are the 4 foods that are most likely to cause problems for people that are maybe a little bit lower on the inflammation spectrum. They don't have so many extreme symptoms. They just want to start, as you mentioned, an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. So decreasing or cutting out gluten contains, next dairy. I have a nuanced conversation in the book about grass-fed versus not grass-fed, A2 versus A1. I really get very granular as far as the science around the different types of dairy. It's certainly not a blanket statement, but for the sake of simplicity of today, looking at dairy, third would be industrial seed oils like vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil, and the science around that being pro-inflammatory. Sorry. And then 4 would be sugar, which is, I mean, pretty, most of your listeners probably know that already. But even the natural sounding euphemisms for sugar, that make it sound like a little bit like agave nectar is a good example of that. It's just because it sounds like a plant doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't behave. It still behaves very inflammatory wise to the body, especially high fructose sweeteners like agave nectar. So even
what about monk? I hear everybody talking about monk fruit lately.
Monk is better. Monk fruit is better. Stevia or stevia is better.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's these lower carb natural sweeteners. I mean, they're still, in my opinion, probably they have their own problems if you have them in excess. So they should be used as sparingly to sweeten things up. I think they're better alternatives for most people. Mm-hmm. So that's the core 4, and then the eliminate is core 4 plus 4 or more, or 8 is the suffix there on eliminate. So it's the core 4, which I mentioned, plus nightshades, which are a plant group that include peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, goji berries, and white potatoes. The alkaloids in those, the little protein compounds, can be problematic for people that are higher on the inflammation spectrum. Next would be eggs. The albumin in the egg white can be problematic. It can pass through the gut lining and trigger inflammation for people that have increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut syndrome. The next would be legumes. So there's things like beans, basically different beans and lentils, things like that. And then what else didn't I mention? Nuts and seeds, the last one.
Yeah,
nuts and seeds can be fine for some people, but they can be problematic. The lectins and phytic acid in those, the roughage can be irritating for some people's digestion. So you're having the person that's trying to do like the epitomization of a healthy meal. They're like having like lots of maybe spinach salad with nuts and seeds on it and an egg on it. Well, I mean, the oxalates in the spinach or the albumin in the egg white or the nightshade ridden like dressing could be problematic. So am I saying that salad is unhealthy? No, I'm not. But a healthy food can work great for one person and flare the next person up. That's bioindividuality.
Yeah. And it's funny, I'm laughing because I feel like I had been vegan years ago when I started to first go through these. And yes, I felt great at first, but then I'm living off of that kind of stuff, like the Buddha bowls, as you call them. Everything that you're saying was in there. Mm-hmm. And I had more digestive issues. It really it flared me. Exactly what you're saying. It almost like decreased everything. I think I had more autoimmune now looking back. Yeah. That caused so many other things for me, like even infertility for so many years, based on my individuality. Not that those foods, like you're saying, do that. And I can tell they do, but I would love a consultation with you too. The Keep It Simple, Sexy podcast is brought to you by KO Body Care. So tell me if this sounds familiar. You have a ton of high-end serums and creams for your face, but nothing of the same quality for the skin on your body. And that's where my company, KO Body Care, comes in. Our skincare products are made with the same powerful, transformative ingredients as luxury facial products, but they're formulated just for the skin on your body. The same goes for our supplements. We use only the highest quality, clean, plant-based ingredients that help your skin glow from the inside out. My 2 current firming must-haves are our concentrated firming serum. It's our award-winning total body serum to firm, tone, and deeply hydrate topically. I love to add it with our Skin Perfect Next Gen Collagen. It is so much more than just a marine-based collagen. It also has hyaluronic acid, phytoceramides, trace minerals, antioxidants to protect your skin, boost your collagen elastin, and help your skin glow from the inside out. If you're wanting to learn more about KO Body Care supplements and skincare, head to kobodycare.com and use KISS20 for 20% off your first purchase. You break it down where I feel like some people may feel this is a little overwhelming. Like, these sound like really good foods. I thought I was on the right path.
Mhm.
But you break it down where you may either want to eliminate 4, or you eliminate all 8, and then you can add it back in. Can you explain just generally, that you're
Yeah.
not on this diet forever? And also you kind of mentioned about the vegan versus meat eating. And it's funny, now I find that I feel much better, and I've had allergies tested and do all that, like on fish and meat. It's more sustainable energy for me as
Yeah.
well when I have to eliminate a lot of these other foods as I work through this inflammatory process. So can you
Yeah.
break that down?
Sure. And there's a whole section in the book for people that are more plant-based, vegans, vegetarians, as I was for many years too. And there comes a point where you need to look on, is this working for you long term? Like you said, there could be a honeymoon period because coming off the standard American diet and processed foods, a lot of things are better than that, right? But just because something's better doesn't mean it's optimal for you long term. So
Mhm.
having a reckoning, and I have this with patients all the time that are trying to do the well-intentioned thing, or doing it for they think ethical reasons or environmental reasons, and they're coming to the point where, is there a way that works for me? Is there some pivoting? Is there some flexibility here where I
Mhm.
could be in alignment with my health? And we're a part of nature. So if something is not working with you, which is a part of nature, we need to open up our minds to say, how can I be in alignment with homeostasis in my body, which is a part of nature? And I think there's a certain level of arrogance that we have as humanity, that somehow we think we're separate than nature or higher than nature. We are not. We are all part of it. Your homeostasis is telling you something. And homeostasis, if you think about it like this, you look at climate change and global warming, that's a sort of planetary inflammation that's going on. We are all we're a microcosm of what's going on a planetary level. So inflammation is sort of like individual physiological climate change. It's a disturbance of the immune system because it's not inherently bad. It's a disruption of balance in our environment, in our own ecosystem. So I would really just speak hope and love to everybody that is vegan or vegetarian for whatever reason, and just saying, what is my own environment telling me? Am I in alignment with nature or not? And there are modifications. So there are people that are doing it for religious reasons or whatever, and I give the
Mhm.
modifications in the book. So there are ways to go about it, but we have to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing working for me long term or not? And have a reckoning with yourself. Yeah, that's the reintroduction is just as important as the elimination. Just as you get your body talking, you want to see, what does my body love? What does my body not love? And let me just speak this, is that just because your body doesn't necessarily like something right now, doesn't necessarily mean you can't have it forever and ever. My
Mhm.
goal with my patients, at least, is to start to heal these issues, whether that be an underlying gut problem or the immune system's irritation with things, start improve that resilience, start to improve resilience capacity, so you can reintroduce these things long term. And I talk about that through the book. Like, okay, just because maybe have bloating or a flare up from something, or you have these symptoms, increased fatigue from this food, it doesn't mean it's forever and ever. So I want people to have a healthy relationship with food and realize it's not your enemy. It's just a mismatch right now. And there are going to be other foods that serve you better to nourish and heal and to recover better than what you're focusing on. So reintroduction, we're going to try everything back in. We're going to walk through all the foods that you took out. We're going to see and test it for yourself. Be your own
Mhm.
N of one experiment, because that honestly gives people that agency that I talked about earlier. Is that it's not a matter of some doctor pontificating and saying that's bad, or some article or research that you read or some podcast that you listened to. It's going to be your own knowledge to know, this doesn't work for me right now. So all the noise can go away because you'll know with resolute confidence of what works for your body and what doesn't.
That's amazing, and it's so beautifully said about the world. I mean, the inflammation and all of that. I mean, it really hits home um, about how we're all interconnected and where we're at just right now with the world too. So, is there a way that we can slay inflammation, as you actually say in your book? I mean, obviously it's the testing and eliminating and seeing what's working for you, but is there a general way, general foods maybe that are pretty good for everybody? And also, what happens, like, let's say we get to a really good point, but we add gluten and we're going to go through the holidays or we're on vacation and we don't have, these alternatives. What happens at that point when we have maybe eliminated? It's something that's like a long-term thing for us. Like for me, I've always been allergic to dairy since I was a kid. It made me nuts and crazy. So it's just, and it's like off the charts allergy for me. So it's something I can never really add in. How can I recover from that when it sneaks into some of my foods and in general?
Well, I mean, there's so many recipes in the book. People have dozens and dozens of recipes to focus on that are eliminate compliant and core 4 compliant, depending on what they decide to do based on their specific quiz score. So that's really opening up yourself to a new way of eating and a new way of nourishing your body. And you're eating delicious, yummy food. It's not boring. People love the recipes in that book. So it's just a matter of leaning into it and nourishing your body and focusing on things you can have, which is quite a bit with those protocols. And I think so many people, what I want them, and I talk about this throughout the book, is having that paradigm shift, that it's not restrictive to avoid foods that don't make you feel well. It's self-respect. And you're also learning about your body. That's also a form of self-respect. And when you reintroduce it, that's also a form of self-respect for you to see what works for you and what doesn't. So I think that it's just a paradigm shift to say, look, I want to feel great more than I think I miss something that potentially doesn't make me feel great. At the same time, being curious to say, maybe this foods will work for me, but I'm going to do an experiment right now to calm inflammation levels down. And then there'll be a time and place to bring it back in. And I will use that reintroduction as a meditation to see, does this serve me or not? Again, if it does not, it is not punitive or restrictive or arduous. It is like, no, I love feeling great. And that's the paradigm shifts I see every time. If patients do it the right, or if the reader does it the right way, they do have that paradigm shift where they're like, whoa, this is a bad trade-off to ever bring something like that back in, because they're really focusing on all this yummy, delicious stuff that they are able to do. And it's working in alignment with their physiology. Again, that will evolve as their health improves. It's not going to be static. So that's what I would say for everybody that's up against that.
Can I just say too, you give me goosebumps a little bit because of the comparison too, of the self-respect for yourself, that you are worth treating, being healthy and happy and having that. But the same thing, if something doesn't suit you in life, if it's that person in your life, if it's a job in your life or a career, or, you want to pivot, exactly what you're saying, that we can make those changes and really just tune in not only to our body, how we're feeling. I mean, it really, and I think the perfect place to begin is sometimes with our foods, because we can tell emotions are so much harder. Maybe a job change is harder. Maybe a person in your life, you're just like so unsure, but a food, it's like, oh, I get a headache from that immediately, or like I feel bloating. So you just have this immediate feedback for yourself to just start to really transform your life and show yourself the respect that you deserve. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's culture's so backwards, right? It's like, well, it's diet culture. If you talk about anything, avoiding foods that make you feel like crap isn't diet culture. It's just not. It's just, it's self-respect.
The word diet for me is just so hard. It's like, I hate saying it, but there's really not anything else to say. It's the noun I always say instead of the verb,
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's food medicine, really. And it's not, diet's about restriction and weight loss for the sake of it, and like being like shaming your way into health. This is completely different. That's why I call it food peace in both of the books, like in all 3 of the books that I've written, because that's what I talk about with patients. It's like, no, what's in alignment with my physiology right now? What makes me feel great? What nourishes my body? So that's really the message of why we're doing what we're doing. We're learning about our body and what works us and what does not work for us. I think that's really the message. And if somebody has a food, like you mentioned, maybe they're on vacation or around holidays or something like this, I would say move through those seasons of life, because there's always a holiday, there's always a birthday party, there's always a graduation party, there's always a vacation right around the corner.
There is.
It's like I hear it all year round. It's just, if you're waiting for the right time, it's now. How are you going to move through those seasons of your life, those occasions in your life, in a way that serves you? And to me, I don't see it as like off the wagon. I fell off the wagon. There's no wagon. Your life is the wagon. What's working for you and what's not, you can't fall off of it. You're either in alignment with what works for you or what doesn't. And, that's what it is. So but I think that the person that's listening to this should even, let's say they willingly know, when I have that dairy or that bread, pasta, whatever, I'm going to pay for it. I'm not going to feel so good around it. I don't want them to have shame or stress or anxiety around it. And that's easier said than done. But I would say to really start to heal their relationship with food and their body and themselves, to say, I'm going to have that, do it consciously, but even use that meal as a meditation and say, maybe they'll probably eat a little bit less of it. They'll be eating more mindfully, to say, I'm going to have a couple bites. And I know if I have a little bit more, I'm not going to feel so good. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to stop. And that's really part of food peace. It's saying, eat whatever you want, but I want you to have awareness and consciousness of what works for you and what doesn't, instead of being so clouded and confused because there's so much conflicting information out there on the internet with Dr. Google, but also confusion in their body because they're like, what the heck? I don't even know what's up and what's down with this stuff because my body's so confused. So by calming and creating a center for yourself, you have clearer eyes on a physiological level. Your body will have clarity on what works for you and what doesn't. So my thought is, if you have a food that you know consciously doesn't work for you, then eat it and ask yourself, was it worth it or not? If it was worth it, quit shaming yourself and move on. Maybe it's the socialization or with your friends and family and you just wanted to do that, then do it. You have complete freedom to do that. But many times people will have it. They'll do it mindfully, like teaching them to do, and they'll realize, oh, this wasn't worth it. Then at that point, they have that complete awareness to know, I love feeling great more than I thought. I missed that. And it's not a form of restriction anymore. They are not bound by that control of that food anymore. They have true agency over their health, not in an obsessive controlling way, but just it's something that's going to dim their light is a bad trade-off.
I completely get it, because I feel like I was at one point all the time, before, especially in my really fitness modeling days, being so fit because you're judged upon everything. So it's like, I can't eat that. I got to shoot tomorrow, whatever. And then you like flare up, you like dive into it. And now it's like, I've gotten to that emotional point and that connection, exactly what you're saying, which is like, if I'm going to eat a little bit, then I'm aware of it. And then you're deciding, but you don't feel guilty. I've always hated the word cheat meals and like these fitness magazines. Cheating. You're not cheating. You're anything but yourself by saying that.
Exactly. There's so much charge to those words. It's not cheating. Yeah, it's really not. And
it's living.
Exactly. Because I think sometimes the shame and stress around the foods is worse than the food themselves. Meaning that if they have it, it's like, okay, it'd be better off if you just ate it and moved on with your life and just took mindful awareness of how that made you feel, versus like living with that. Like, drop it and move on with your life. A cheat meal, it's the antithesis of food peace.
Yeah. This is also beautifully said. I just feel like what you're saying, again, touching upon, is just being present. And when you're present with all these choices, you're going to be more present with the world around you and what's really making you optimal and, the most vital in this world.
Absolutely.
To wrap it up, we always have a speed round, and this is kind of lead into your other book. Just, these are quick kind of questions, but I ask this to everybody, so I have to ask it to you. Do you eat breakfast, or do you fast in the morning, or fast it in the evening?
It depends. I mean, that's really the topic of my third book. It's intuitive fasting. It's like, if I want to eat, I eat. If I don't, that's part of food peace too. It's having the flexibility to show up for yourself on any given day and check in with your body. So food and fasting are both tools. So it depends on the day. Today, I fasted until lunch. So you're talking about today. I actually do that mostly during the week because it's just I feel great doing it. But on the weekends, I won't. I will do a bigger eating window.
I love it. Perfect. And one more question too. Do you drink any alcohol? Talking about sugars. And if so, which is your favorite, or which do you recommend? Is there a better one?
I don't drink. It's like one hand in the last 3 years since that's right. But it's very small. Like normally before the pandemic, I would at work occasions have something normally because other people were having it. It was just very tiny, not even a full glass of something. So basically I don't drink. But I do have patients that want to know about this stuff. So I'm pretty savvy with this stuff myself for my patients. But I would recommend a low alcohol, biodynamic, organic, regenerative, biodynamic. I said that already. Third party tested for mold wine. I recommend Dry Farm wines because they curate all this stuff. They find the European lines that are fitting that criteria. So that's what I would say for people that are going to drink, because alcohol isn't healthy. It's a neurotoxin. So the least damage is where my mind goes to.
Okay, we'll have to tell my whiskey drinking husband that.
We'll talk afterwards.
Okay.
Come on, Carnegie, let's go.
Yeah, I was like, he loves a good soft pretzel and some whiskey, just like his dad, who lives right down the street. So yeah, Carnegie. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cole. It's been amazing. Can you tell everybody where we can find your books, more information, maybe a private consultation, and all your tips as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Everything's at drwillcole.com. That's drwillcole.com. There's the links to all the books there, the podcast, The Art of Being Well. There's a new episode every Thursday. The links to the podcast are there, and tons of articles I've written for the past 12 years. And yeah, the quizzes that we talked about too, and a consultation information too.
Yeah, if you guys are feeling like you have any type of inflammation, this is the first place to start, is the inflammation spectrum. Read the book. Then maybe you'll want to get into a private consultation if you feel like you need some assistance. But this is the basis of health. I feel like this is such an important podcast with all of our guests. I was really, excited to break this down with Dr. Cole, since it really is the base for you feeling your best. And as, we learn too, just being present and how much it's going to translate into so many other parts of your life. Thank you so much, Dr. Cole.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for everybody for listening to today's podcast. For bulleted highlights of actionable steps you can take to reduce the inflammation from your life, make sure to check out the podcast today, subscribe to us. And if you love today's episode, or you know somebody who needs to hear about this, make sure to pass it along to a friend. Have a beautiful day. Thanks for listening. Make sure you're subscribed, and feel free to share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Have questions you need answered? Text me at 1-310-361-8697. Make sure you're following me on social at Christine Bullock, and have a healthy, happy week. See you next time.